okay with 20, 25 minutes at all?
Yeah. I thought it says 10.
10 minutes is fine.
Oh, well.
Okay, if I can ask you all to sit down, we can start the session. I've seen the third speaker about 10 minutes ago, but he doesn't seem to be here. But never mind, we'll carry on. This morning's session, we have 3 talks. Claudia, in the plenary, talked about the tendency to think of security as something you add on afterwards, something that says no, and that it is important actually for security people to get involved in what the business needs and making sure that that can be delivered. I think the 3 talks that we've got this morning are very much about that, about making sure that security is right there in the design of new systems in the broadest possible sense. We've got one talk about a national network, we've got one talk about organizational networks, and we've got one talk if he turns up. If you're in another session, Jan, please can you come here? One talk about designing a voting system, but again, getting security in from the start. So, first speaker is Rob Evans, who is one of our senior network engineers on Janet, who's going to talk about how we designed security into the new Super Janet 5 network.
As Andrew just said, my name is Rob Evans. I'm one of the senior engineers at Ukerna. Apologies if you're expecting to see Duncan Rogerson here. He was originally scheduled to give this talk but couldn't make it, so you're stuck with me, I'm afraid. So what this talk is about, it's about our experiences of building a reliable, resilient network. A network that's ensuring the security of the service, making sure that the service is always there when you need it. It isn't about privacy, intrusion detection, or the things you might generally assume to be in a security session. Ensuring the reliability of the service works with these so that when you turn on your computer, you have access to the network. What we started off with before the Super Janet 5 process was, funny enough, Super Janet 4. This was launched in 2001, and one of the main design aims behind it was to break out of the cycle of previous networks where towards the ends of their lives they'd been congested, we'd been putting in bypasses, and it became very hard to manage, caused all sorts of issues. And it succeeded in that. It ran for its full lifetime, plus a few months beyond, and it didn't have any capacity problems, and it was very resilient. But it did have some weak spots. The architecture of Janet consists of sites which are connected to regional networks, then regional networks which are connected to the backbone that we run. At the end of SuperJanet 4, the regional networks were connected at speeds from 622 megasecond to 2.5 gigasecond. Most of the connections were protected SDH circuits. There were some gigabit Ethernet circuits, but we tried to limit those to intra-room fiber. We don't really have a lot of good feeling for wide area Ethernet at the moment. I'll come on a bit more to that. The backbone was very, very resilient, but the regional network links were less so. Now, as I say, there were mainly protected SDH links, so that's good. Yeah, well, yes, it is good. It's certainly better than unprotected bits of fiber, but it still means you have a single router at one end, a single router at the other end. And over the lifetime of a network, which 5 years plus, 6 years, there's lots of scope for roadworks, fiber rerouting, and the network can tend to lose resilience as you go along. Bits of fiber shifted around, and before you know it, even though you've put a lot of work in doing a network design to be sure that everything's diverse, a few years later on, you find 2 fibers are running at the same duct, 0 comes through, and the link's gone. And when the telco is operating the SDH protection, you don't know that there's a problem with the protect path until you need it and it isn't there. So among a bunch of other things, what we wanted from SuperJanet 5 was to increase the resilience of the regional network links. If a site link goes down, then it takes off one site. If a regional network link goes down, it can take off tens or even hundreds of sites. And that's not good for the figures. So what we want is security against this guy. Thank our colleagues at HENet for this photograph. It's a site that prefers to remain anonymous, but there was some building work going on. The digger had cut through the cable and placed it on top of the wall that you see hanging there. Everything was still working. A little while later, it knocked it off and it fell down to where you see it there. And it's not actually resting on the steps, it's just bowed and carrying on with part of the conduit missing. Now, fortunately, throughout all this, the service actually kept on working, but you don't really want to rely on that. So this is what we came up with for the architecture of SJ5. The red blobs are the core points of presence. At the top you've got Glasgow, Warrington, Leeds, Bristol, Reading, London, and at the bottom are 2 special core points which are in London's Docklands. I'll mention those a bit later on. This is kind of the fiber route, not the circuits. Each of the core POPs is connected across the fiber links by 10 gig. And the bottom ones at G and H are connected at 10 gig to both E and F. So G has got 2 links and H has got 2 links. The purple links are the regional networks. And it's important to note for the resilience that these are not SDH rings. These are linear circuits. So on the top right, you have a linear circuit going from Glasgow down to Leeds, which takes in 3 regional networks. The basics of it are that it's DWDM equipment on dedicated fiber, operated by Verizon. Because it's dedicated fiber, dedicated equipment, we're not subject to the constraints or requirements of other customers, which is something that's essential for ensuring the reliability of the service. The hardware is Sienna core streams at the core POPs, Sienna 4200s on the regional links. On top of that, there's the IP equipment. At the core POPs, there are Juniper T640s, which we manage by ourselves. Oops, sorry about that. So to just reiterate a bit what I was saying, is that the regional networks have 2 diverse fiber connections to the backbone. They're both of the same capacity to ensure resilience. they go from 2 different POPs in the regional network to 2 different core POPs. And to drill down a bit into that, at the top, you've got the collector arc, which is the thing that the regional network is linked to. Then there's IP circuit, the green blobs at the bottom, the labels on those say regional network POP 1 and regional network POP 2. So between the left and the right, the geographically diverse points. One is one point on the regional network, and one is the other point on the regional network. The blue lines going up are IP circuits to the regional network. So if, for example, this was Fatman, then one of them would be going off to Glasgow, and the other one would be going down to Leeds. And then some of the sites also take part in our light path service, which we have an extra kit. The bottom left grey, half a blob, is a bit of SDH kit, which is usually a Sienna Metro Director or a 3600. That stuff is non-resilient because it's research stuff. It's not part of the production IP kit. One of the other things to note is that there is a link between the 2 green blobs here, which is a link internal to the regional network. And it's important for the diversity that that link is different to any other parts of the black collector arc and also the core network to ensure that the access is resilient. And getting that took a lot of time, a lot of studying of mapping data. We found out that finding really diverse fiber is a challenge. A lot of people spent a lot of time looking at fiber maps, trying to figure out whether their regional network fiber coincides at any point with the backbone fiber. And it comes down to how diverse is diverse enough. Are 2 fibers in the same duct diverse? Well, you probably all say no to that. How about if it's opposite sides of the same road, or in the same trench, opposite sides of the same roads? Parallel roads. At some point, you have to make a call on whether you think it's good enough. But on top of that, is the information accurate? This red bridge in the front is a bridge we were told that one of our fibre routes was going along. Fair enough. That's what the mapping said, and we have no reason to doubt them. Well, maybe there's a small reason to doubt them, because some of the day, the bridge looks like this. It's the Tyne Swing Bridge. So we thought, that can't be right, surely. How's that going to work? So we went back to telco, and they said, "Oh, yeah, no, that's right. There are big spools of fibre at either end, and it winds and unwinds." No. No, we said it can't be right. I went back and forth a couple of times. They insisted on their story for a good few iterations, until they eventually owned up and said, "Yeah, okay, the mapping's wrong. It actually goes over one of the other fixed bridges on the other side of it." But one of the points is, we spotted that because it was such an egregious error. I mean, that couldn't possibly be right. How many other more subtle errors are there in the fibre mapping data? To try and so we try and keep on top of this. We do now have direct access to our telco's mapping database, but again, it still relies on the information being accurate. So once we got the physical infrastructure in place, we had to decide how we'd connect to the regional networks. And we chose to mandate SDH for this. So whilst they're linear networks, we're still running SDH on top of them. And there are several reasons for this. The primary one being that SDH, if there's a break in the fiber, SDH notices faults, brings down the interface, and triggers the IP routing changes very quickly, 50 milliseconds or whatever. We don't get the warm fuzzies from link loss forwarding because you might have several spans and different bits of gigabit Ethernet. One goes down, and haven't found that we always get the link down going all the way back. There were other alternatives. BFD is a key one, but at the time we were designing the network, and it's still the case today, it's not really mature enough, not widely deployed enough. So whilst it might operate on our T640s in the core, we might interface to older Ciscos, Riverstones, anything you can think of. The Ethernet OAM, Carrier Ethernet, PBT, whatever it's being called today, that is very interesting, and that could well be the way we move towards, but it wasn't really available, again, when we were doing this. And because it's a linear network, there's no Ethernet, there's no SDH rings with regard to the optical protection. But we do need quick failover for streaming media and just for the availability, so we chose SDH. There's another point on the bottom of the slide, which you can't see again, which relates to the cost. And some of the regional networks did say that the cost for SDH interfaces was too high. So the solution for that was we set aside some of the backbone funding to pay for SDH interfaces for the regional networks, and also there was some opportunity to reuse interfaces from Supergiant 4 for the regional networks for Supergiant 5. So we've got them all connected together now, but we still need to have services going from the backbone to the regional network. In the past, the regional networks have had what you might call great autonomy in designing their own networks, and they've exercised this. So that does tend to lean a little bit towards a mismatch between services we're offering on the regional network and the core, and also making it very difficult to roll out new services. So to try and get around this, with Supergiant 5, we're introducing another thing called the Technical Design Authority. And what this does, it works with the regional networks on their design and their procurement to try and ensure that we offer consistent services from the backbone out to the edge of the network. So not just services that we offer already, but new services, so IPv6, light paths, and whatever's coming up in the future. So far we've talked a bit about the regional networks and the access to the regional networks, but we haven't really touched on the backbone. We prefer big, fat pipes. They're simpler, easier to manage, and so we're currently running at 10 gig. We're starting a 40 gigabits per second trial any day now, and the equipment's actually being installed this week. And the reasons for this are quite, there's quite a few of them. If you were in the Sienna presentation yesterday, we touched upon a few, because there are other ways of offering high bandwidth services, but we've chosen to try 40 gig, at least for now. We should have that running within a couple of weeks, and the plan is that we roll that out network-wide within a couple of years. So one of the things you might also have heard of yesterday is PMD, phase mode distortion. Well, for us, PMD is SEP, someone else's problem, because our contract for SJ5 says that it will run 40 gig. So if it means the telco has to spend a bit more money, it means the telco has to spend a bit more money. One of the other things that this architecture gives us the flexibility of is that we can separate not just large, but also disruptive flows out onto dedicated channels. One of the big examples of this in Europe at the moment is the traffic for the Large Hadron Collider in CERN. So most of the large number of European networks have 10 gig light paths going straight back to Geneva. But it's not just this, it's also the specialist research requirements that some of our customers have. And we need to make sure that whilst we cater to the needs of our research customers, the IP network, the basic Supergiant network, is sacrosanct. It must be always there. And so separating it out at lower levels gives us the flexibility to do that reliably and ensuring the safety of our main service. And it also gives us the ability to add extra channels at marginal costs. Also within the contract, we can get new channels between any two of our core POPs at a fixed price, no matter how many hops it is in between, which has proven useful on something I'll come on to in a minute, which is our external connectivity interconnects. And we're also using it to provide Giant with additional capacity between London and Dublin. As colleagues from Giant might know, there have been a few issues with this, a few teething problems, but it's starting to bed down now. The telco has got a dedicated buffer stock of cards which are just for us, so that when we say we want a new bandwidth channel, they can turn it up quickly and make it available for us. And of course, on top of the bandwidth, we have the routers. Supergiant 4 differentiated between the core routers and the access routers, and at the time, that was due to the hardware that was available to us. It was in 2001, it was very difficult to get a router that did high-speed forwarding and could do filtering at the same time. So we had to separate out the core and the access routers, and it provided some benefits as well, because it meant that we could have our access routers at the other end of the link, which gave us greater management, greater visibility of the link to the regional network. But with SJ5, we've collapsed both functions onto the backbone routers, which means, again, from terms of management, it's far fewer boxes for us to manage and upgrade. The routers can now do high-speed forwarding, high-speed line rate filtering without a problem. So there's more than 20 fewer routers in SJ5 than there were in SJ4, and this is a feature rather than the bug. We use the optical equipment now. We still have active optical kit, the Sienna equipment at the far end, so we use that for the link managing. But there's still a few wrinkles. As if you were in Steve Williams' talk yesterday, you might have heard him mention the net flow. Getting sampled net flow at the rate that our security guys need, which is they want 1 in 10. When we're shifting 10, 20 gigabits per second on a single box, the routers just don't do it at the moment. And even with new hardware, we haven't been guaranteed that they will do it in the future. So we have to certainly look at other options for that, such as optical monitoring or reducing the sampling rate. So we've got a network, and that's all very fine. People in the UK can talk to other people in the UK, but it's still not part of the internet, and I'm told there's a bigger internet out there. So we have 2 locations in London's Docklands, the POPs G and H that I mentioned at the start. And whilst we'd like to have greater diversity between those, it's very difficult to get high-speed transit elsewhere. And even if you do, it's usually long lines back from Docklands. So we prefer to just realize that, get the transit in Docklands, and be sure, because we know the network then, that we can distribute it elsewhere, reliably. So each site has 2 times 10 gig to 2 different backbone nodes, but that's still not enough. The bandwidth we require is growing ahead even of our availability of 40 gig a second. So each of those nodes will be upgraded to 4 times 10 gig into the backbone before the start of the next academic year. And within each site in Docklands then, again to ensure the full resilience and the reliability, we have a different transit provider in each location, each of which could handle the full transit load if needs be. We connect to different internet exchange point LANs. We have private peerings in both locations, and our primary giant link goes to one place, the backup giant link goes to the other place. But why do we need all this? Well, 1 year ago, this was our total outbound traffic into Janet. As you can see, it peaked at about 11.1 gig inbound. 11.1. Last week, it was this, 20.1. So that means it's pretty much doubled in 1 year. But at the same time, if you look at the blue curve, the outbound traffic from Janet, that's only gone up from 5.4 gig to 6.8 gig. In the past, we had periods of the day where we were exporting more than we were importing, but at no point in the day we're doing that now. So the amount of bandwidth that our customers are using is increasing a tremendous amount. And that's why we need this flexibility to be able to add extra bandwidth, call it in almost on demand to build up the network. So now we have this network, we have access to everywhere, we still need someone to run it. Historically, Ukona had quite a convoluted structure. You had the network, you had Ukona, and you had the University of London Computer Centre, which was contracted to manage the network. But that was seen as, that was a fairly significant risk. I mean, it wasn't under the control of Ukona, so they were responsible for the network, but not fully responsible for the operations guys. What happened if they went away? So as of the 1st of January this year, we were taken in-house, so instead of being an employee of ULCC and an employee of Ukona, we're still based in London, and part of that is to ensure the continuity of service. Whereas the main Janet office is, Ukona office is near Oxford. But what we have done, associated with the change, is build a new network operations centre. So this has got redundant access circuits to diverse backbone POPs, all that sort of thing, UPS diesel generators, 20 hours for refueling. And we also have then a second emergency NOC, which is in a different part of London, south of the river, different electrical supplies, different bit of the power grid, which can also take over operations as needs be. And then, for the customer's point of view, there's a single point of contact, which is, again, a point missing off the bottom of the slide there, which is a number that can be diverted to Oxford, or one office in London, or the other office in London as needs be. So, a few stats about SJ5, just before I wrap up. We've got about 6,000 kilometers of dark fiber, nowhere near our friends in the States, I'm afraid. 90 circuits, 60 10 gig circuits, 112 sites housing optical kit. The longest unregenerated link, so that's amplified but not regenerated, is 554 kilometers. The longest single span, so that's unamplified, unregenerated, is 243 kilometers from the UK into Ireland. There's a 51.2 dB loss on that link. But there's still one problem to solve. There's operator error. We've got all of this lovely network, but when some klutz comes in, that's me actually, on a Wednesday morning, has a heavy night the night before, just sleeps on the keyboard, who knows what happens to the network, but we have a solution for that too. Anyway, that's about it. Any questions?
Oh, no, there is a question. Yes, thank you for not showing what life as a Ukona employee looks like.
So I would like to know how do you manage the, so how is organized the regional network? So in the sense, two users, two university or two research center in the same city are directly connected to the same POP in the regional network, and the router is there, or the router is on the core, only on the core?
No, if two sites are connected to the same regional network, it goes to the regional network's router, but doesn't come onto the backbone. Is that what you're asking?
No, sorry, I don't understand.
Okay. Two sites that are connected to the same regional network, the traffic only goes to the regional network and back. It doesn't come into the core. Is that what you're asking? Or?
No, because you said that in this generation of the network, you collapsed the function of access and core on the same router. So how do you connect the two users in the same city? Through the core or through the router on the access?
Right. The routers I'm talking about here are purely the backbone routers. The access router is the access for the regional network, not access for the site. So the regional network hierarchy is still beyond that. That is varies according to the management model of the regional network. Sites that have two sites on the same regional network don't come into the backbone at all. That's all handled in the regional network. The collapsing I was talking about was simply the access of the regional networks onto the backbone. If you see.
I think, Christoph, we'd better carry on with the next speaker. Maybe
catch me later.
Okay. Thank you very much. Aha. Thank you. My heart rate has just dropped somewhat.
Is it
Speaker
on?
3 has arrived. Okay, speaker 2 is Enes Karazlan, who wears a number of hats, does a number of different jobs. He works as network manager at Ege University, I hope I've pronounced right. He's also a member of ULAC CERT, so the CERT for the Turkish Turkish National Research and Education Network, and he's been looking at problems or how to design enterprise-wide web security.
Okay, thank you.
Try to set up this.
Will it fix it?
I don't know.
Okay, till it's fixed, I can start. I will be talking about web security. I will summarize it and I will try to not make you bored. It's Murphy's law, there's always problems. The other one. Yes. This one. Okay. It's excellent. Thanks. So I'm the campus network manager of Ege University, and meanwhile we are working to raise security awareness in ULAKNet, which is the regional, which is the academic network of Turkey. So I will start with why do we need web security, and I will tell the main parts that network and web system awareness, secure coding, and I will describe this web security model that's needed for web security, then implementation and conclusion. So we see that the web server usage is increasing day by day. There are many information systems, every unit, every faculty, every department wants his own web server. And we see web servers on all devices, network devices, wireless access points, etc. You know that. When we look at the incidents, there's a slightly big increase. ZoneHash is a site where the web incidents are posted. Every hacker says that I hacked this site. And in 2004, there was a 36% increase. And also CSI FBI has a computer crime and security survey, and in this survey, 95% of the correspondents say that they experienced more than 10 website incidents in 2005. So, what's it all about? So, the incidents can cause loss of privacy of the customer data, also many results of private data loss. It can damage the enterprises or vendors' reputation because the website is your window to the public world, and the hackers can reach the network devices and do whatever they want. So incidents can cause very damage to your network. So what are the major problems in web security? We don't pay enough importance to web security we know that the traditional security measures are not sufficient. You have to open port 80 for public access. And also, we see that there is insufficient web server security and there is significantly lack of secure coding, which is the most important part. Okay, Bruce Schneier says we wouldn't need so much network security if we didn't have such bad software security. So we have bad software security, but we can solve this problem, and by this we won't need so much network security. So we must develop a plan to decrease those incidents. Sun Tzu has a book, The Art of War, which is about war actually, but it's a war about good and evil, and hackers try to hack your sites and you try to protect it. And to win a war, one must know the way. So you must know the way to protect your assets. You must know the way to deal with these problems. So we start with network awareness, which and called web system awareness. So the first part is you must know your enemy. How will the hackers attack your website? What will they will use? But the most important one is you must know yourself. You must know your assets. You must know what to protect. That's the most important part of protecting your web systems. And if you don't know the systems better than the attacker, you cannot protect it anyway. You can deploy many expensive devices, you can deploy whatever you want, but if you don't know your system, you cannot protect it. So, network awareness is the most important part of security. Every part of security, not even web security, every part of the security, you must have the ability of knowing your assets. You must know what is happening on your network. So, we will describe web system awareness is a specialized form of network awareness actually, and we will talk about it in 3 different parts: web system awareness, vulnerability analysis, and system monitoring. In web infrastructure awareness, you must collect and have current system information. You must know your assets, then you will have the ability to protect it. Then you must implement vulnerability testing, and you must know your visible weaknesses. The hackers, the attackers will use these tools, but you must use these tools before them. And you must monitor the system. You must see the current status of the system, what's happening on the network or not. What do we need for web infrastructure awareness? We must have the web server IP addresses. We must know the protocols used, site domain names, web server ports used, operating system, web server software types and versions, is Apache or IIS, and the versions. If that site uses content management system, portals, wikis, bulletin boards, discussion forums, web frameworks, which frameworks use PHP, .NET, G2EE, and all types of applications, application file names, path to the applications, application parameters, and their types. We must collect as much information about our web systems as possible, and then deploy security measures to protect these. And I will talk a little bit about secure coding. We must make sure that secure coding and vulnerability testing is implemented in the software development lifecycle. There are assurance models for that. We can say OWASP, CLASP, and Microsoft SDL just as examples. There are many OWASP tutorials available on OWASP.org, and many tools that you can demonstrate and show the vulnerabilities of these tools, and many tutorials about it is available on the net. So, if everybody codes the best way, there won't be any problem. But it cannot be implemented perfectly as there are project deadlines. You have to finish the web application as soon as possible. For this reason, security is left behind most of the time. And programmers are not aware of all the threats. These are the main reasons that security cannot be implemented perfectly in web application development lifecycle. But we should focus on secure coding and implement it as much as we can. Also, we will talk about network-based measures for securing our applications. We modeled what can be done for enterprise-wide web security. That's standardization, awareness, training and testing, detection, prevention, and coordinating all of these sub-modules in a coordination center. We must have a standard in our enterprise. We must have a policy, and we must define what is permitted and not. We must define the preferred system. We must suggest them the system we want. We must supply templates, best practices, sometimes libraries, software libraries that they can use in their practices. And we must enforce secure coding and documentation of the web applications. So standardization is a very good start, and details are on the paper. I cannot describe in detail now. And training and testing is the most important one too. We must implement workshops and show secure coding examples, attack scenarios. We can deploy a training portal, and we can show related secure coding best practices that will be available in our network. We can give guidelines, standards, and those information will be publicly available for the intranet, extranet, or all the public. And we can deploy a test server. We can implement black box testing. That is, there is the application and you attack it. And we can implement source code analysis. Vulnerability testing of web applications is a very challenging task and has some difficulties, but the importance is very obvious. So intrusion detection, we must implement intrusion detection in our network. We must deploy before our web servers. For example, Snort can be used, most security can be used. We must use log control. We can deploy honeypots, honeynets to learn new type of attacks. And those will also be very important for forensics also. And is the important part. And prevention, we can implement access control. It can be in a network firewall or router access list. We can permit some protocols and we can block some or give permission to some networks. And we can also implement server local security, that we can implement a application firewall on the server itself, or we can implement a network firewall, can be working as a reverse proxy, just as mod security or mod rewrite. So implementation. We try to implement web security model in Ege University and Turkey. And also we have a security group about web in Ulaksi Cert, and we are trying to increase web security awareness. We focus on web system awareness and training. We use open source tools, and we will give some of the results in this presentation. So, we use active and passive system awareness. Our aim is to collect the current view of the network and current view of the web systems. Firstly, we implement active scan. We use Nmap and Amap open source tools, and we collect the statistics and analyze it in a Perl code. We are thinking of using an open source search engine which will index all of the web pages for the sites we try to protect the most. Also, we use passive scan. That is, the network is sniffed and you analyze it by Snort and mod security. So when we look at the system, you make periodic scans and you make a server information database. So you, with this information, you update the configuration of the IDS. The IDS is always sniffing the network data and using passive analysis, he's finding new web servers that cannot be, that couldn't be implemented, found by the periodic scan. So with a triggered scan, it can update the server information database and then update the configuration. So the two of the systems are working together. Active and passive systems is a hybrid system, and with this system we can have the current view of the network and the web systems. So we implemented these. We collected data for a month. There is a web IDS and T-web IDS, separate machines working all the time. They are optimized for web security, and one doesn't know the network, doesn't know the web servers that's protecting. One is aware that there is a web server on this IP address that's Linux and that's Apache working PHP codes, and it even knows the application file names and is optimized. And when we look at the statistics, web IDS has 902,151 and T-web IDS has 10%. That's a very significant difference. And by this, we can decrease the amount of false alarms, and the security professional has less data to examine. More statistics are given in the paper. So we are trying to make the security officers' work easier. It's not perfect, but it's getting better and better while it learns the network it's operated on. The alerts are not always attacks, actually. There are unstandard applications running on the network. For this reason, the intrusion detection system is giving alerts every time that page is requested. Also, security officer can force the web system administrators to decrease that content, decrease that unstandard content. And by this implementation, we can reduce the total number of alerts better. So we also make a vulnerability analysis. We updated it. You know, we have a server information database that's learned with the awareness model. So we make a scan and we form a vulnerability report database. By this vulnerability report database, if that web server is vulnerable, we can update the configuration of the IDS, and IDS can give different prioritizations for the new attacks. For example, a vulnerable web system will have more prioritization than the others. Also, we are planning to report these vulnerabilities by email to the web server administrators also. So we are now building an awareness portal. With this awareness portal, the web server administrators or domain administrators and security professionals will have access to the detailed reports about the web systems, summarize information about the vulnerabilities, and we will recommend actions to solve the problems. And we will track the changes on the systems. For example, if it was Apache, then IIS, and the changes will be seen in the database. And we are planning to expand this implementation to control the critical web servers throughout the different universities in Turkish academic network, ULAKNet. We started in Ege University, but we are planning to build it in every universities. But because of performance issues, we will be only looking at the most critical web servers. So there are many database schemas about the web system. So we will have some users. Users will be members of corporates, and they will look at reports which are from some domains or servers, and we have structured its modeler. Then every university will fit in this model, not the Ege University itself. So we also make training to our web server administrators and also web application developers. We make workshops, meetings, live demos. Habits cannot change easily. So they don't, they say, oh, there is no need of web security. There is SSL and database controls everything. But we are trying to say that, no, it doesn't protect. And we sometimes have to hack them ourselves, really, to show that what can happen. So education is a must, is used in a comics in Turkey, but education is a must. We must educate our users, web application developers. We implement documentations in, we have Web Security TR, also CSERT ULAKBIM.gov.tr has some documents. And we are in the process of using e-learning content that the web application developers will have access to online content and they will read about web security. So, as a conclusion, for enterprise web security, we must implement modules of the web security model. There are many modules. I know there is always an argument about complexity versus protection. So we mustn't make our systems more complex. There was always the same idea that we built honeypots, we built intrusion detection systems, we built web system awareness, then it becomes very complex. So we should select the modules which suit our needs. We shouldn't pay too much money to the products. We can use and produce our open source systems, and that will be just for our systems. That will be the modules which suit our enterprise will be selected. But I think the primary objectives of the enterprise model is web system awareness. So we should know our systems, if they are vulnerable or not, what are the characteristics, if they use PHP nuke, Joomla, etc. And we should deploy security measures afterwards. And training the web server administrators and web programmers are very important. We should put very important notice on that. So also intrusion detection is fine for also forensics. And we should deploy web security firewalls if possible. Future plans are fully integrate this model and put more security on our web servers. Continue to increase web security awareness in Turkey, and continue to involve in documentation projects and translations. In OWASP in 2007, it was in a week ago, I think, they developed the new one, the top 10 projects, top 10 vulnerabilities, and we will make it the Turkish translation also. I suggest you, if you are interested in web security, read that. So I hope I didn't bore you, and thanks you for your interest. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. If you have detailed questions, you can contact me anytime you want. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I had one on the difference between the two intrusion detection systems. Were you able to look at the ones that were detected by the untrained system and work out why it was getting them wrong, what it was seeing as attacks that weren't?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about it. Yeah. For example, you have an Apache web server, and if you don't train the intrusion detection system, it can say that there is an IIS attack on this Apache web server. And then you will see many Apache, you will see in the logs that there are IIS attacks, but it's probably a wrong detection, or someone is just port scanning or doing every attack they want. But we can prioritize that. We can make the difference and put the other alerts in another database, then examine it later. But you saw that there is 10 times the log. And in security, if there are too much logs, nobody investigates this. For this reason, we must decrease the amount of alerts for that, and security officials will be able to look at them.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. Yep. Hang on. It's been pointed out to me that the microphone isn't just so we can hear you, it's so people on the website.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Just a very quick question. You said you produce alerts. Can they be integrated in a console like Skill, for example?
Can they?
Integrated in a network monitoring system like Skill, you know it? It's a console for filtering alerts for the personnel that operates security.
Yeah, that can be a combination of
Well,
that.
you
Yeah.
can integrate Snort inside
Yeah.
that.
There are many open source tools and many tools. These can be integrated for the best performance. That can be done. Because all of the alerts are stored in a database. Those databases can be used furtherwards for statistics, for analysis. In forensics, you know, if there's an attack, you have to investigate what has been done. And why not? Thank you.
Thank you. I will.
Somewhere? Just this? Check.
Yep. Okay, right. And our third speaker this morning and final speaker before lunch is Jan Meyer, who is now, I think, has decided he wants to live above sea level, so has moved to Norway from the Netherlands. So he's now working for Uninet, was formerly at SurfNet. But I think his talk is actually based on experiences in ensuring that the Netherlands, although below sea level, does actually stay dry. So looking forward to hearing about it. Thanks, Jan.
How true, how true. Internet voting, a menace to society. I'm actually one of the few people on this globe who has practical experience in running internet voting systems, and I figured, well, it might be interesting to share that. Before you get overly excited, I'm not going to explain an internet voting protocol because that is basically not my field of expertise, but I did design the system architecture to run it on. Interesting, isn't it? Someone once said that basically the only thing that you need to get into a dictatorship is for enough people not paying attention. We had a couple of discussions in the TNC, and it was like, well, I'm seeing all these laptops and all these people reading email and basically heating up the room. But there is actually some relevance towards internet voting for that. Well, internet voting systems. There's a lot of security in that. Security. How do you design a secure system? Why do you design a secure system? I don't know about you, but I need some motivation to do my work properly. Why on earth would I go about properly securing some internet voting system? Because there is a reason. Power. Why do we do voting? Why do we hold elections? It's basically to make sure that the transfer of power to the different leaders is done in a somewhat orderly manner, usually. So we kind of emigrated from bashing each other's heads in and have a revolution every now and then and basically splashing the streets with blood to doing elections. I kind of like that. It makes my life kind of comfortable. This is the reason why voting is important. Oh, and mind you, typically the people that are actually in power, the people that want power, they are actually the people that you really, really, really would not like to be there. But hey, I'm not feeling up to doing it. So, well, apparently it's the way that the world works. But still, I definitely want to have a proper way of kicking them out if they're doing a bad job. What is a bad job? Well, one that doesn't allow me to sleep late on Saturday morning. So, if you look at voting, there's a couple of problems in there. Are you eligible to vote? Usually parliament elections, well, you have to be 18 plus. In most countries. Most votes you actually want to be held anonymous. Why? Well, if you look at Currently, lots of African countries, if you don't vote the way that the people in charge want you to vote, then you get invited to this nice room where they will beat the hell out of your foot soles, which is not really good for sleeping late on Saturday mornings. You want to vote in private because it is your vote. You decide what you vote on. It is not your mother, it is not your wife, it is not your husband, and it's definitely not one of your kids. And you need to elect well-defined subjects. So basically you want to make really sure that the person that you vote for is really the person that you had in mind. I think there was once a great Eddie Murphy movie about that, where he basically figured out, hey, I have the same name as someone on the list. And that was the people that they always voted for. And that person died. So he then went on campaign and, well, got elected in Congress. And it was a really interesting movie if you want to learn something about politics. All this stuff is done according to a well-defined process. So this entire internet voting system, whatever it does, needs to be properly defined, just the way as regular elections are properly defined. How many people here actually volunteer in polling stations during elections? Okay, so you know. If you're not doing that, well, think about what happens if you actually go to an election. Usually you hand in something, and then someone gives you something so that you can actually vote. And there are a bunch of people sitting there, and you always wonder, what on earth are they all doing that? There is one person that could actually do that. Well, yeah, but there is a process behind that. And it's multiple persons because the theory goes that it's hard to actually corrupt more than one person. And somewhere in the 50s, they were actually from different parties. And they didn't trust each other one bit. So yeah, that was kind of a useful measure to make sure that the thing went okay. Nowadays, it doesn't work like this, so if you really want to subvert the process, well, it's going to cost you something, but you can definitely do it. Most of the people in the Netherlands are sitting in the polling stations for the money, or because they've been ordered to. There's not much control there. Right, so we get to internet voting. Somewhere in 2003, the Water Board Rijnland. What is a water board? It's a governmental body that, as a sole task, has it to make sure that there is a proper water level in a certain area. Proper meaning not too low, because then we can't overflow the world market with agricultural products. And it's not too high, because that would interfere with my Saturday morning sleep late. They're elected by roughly 1.2 million people in the area that they work in. And when they started out, bit back, it's the oldest form of democracy that the Netherlands has. And up until something like the half of the 80s, I think, the board members were elected by the local municipality. Then this changed and it became a direct representative democracy, so people had to elect them. So they started out with regular elections, postal voting stations, all that, and it was a massive turnout, something like 2%. So they thought, okay, we're too unknown, marketing, marketing, marketing. So 4 years later, it doubled. Yay. So apparently people weren't too interested. Next time, they included telephone voting. Interesting. But after that, the telephone company didn't want them to have them as a customer ever again. So apparently telephone and voting doesn't really mix. So in the end, they ended up with some people, of which I was one of, and well, they wanted to do internet voting. Why? Not because they wanted to have this perfect voting system, because it's cheap. That's the whole promise. I missed out on one bit. Actually, after the telephone thing, they went to postal. They looked at Switzerland and it's like, hey, it's working there. Can we do that? Yes, we can. So they went postal voting, and then it went something like 25% of voters that actually voted. So this was kind of nice. So now they wanted to do it with internet as well, because it has the promise of actually bringing the cost down tremendously. Postal voting, you have to pay the fee to actually get the ballot back. So it's kind of costly. It's something like €1 per voter. times 1.2 million, which is a considerable amount of money. We had 300,000 euros for the entire internet voting project. So that included developing the application, designing the system, purchasing the hardware, and actually running it, which is not a lot. There was at the time a comparable pilot by the Dutch government, and that they had something like 3 million, I think, for something like 25,000 voters. So the voting system is built on top of what is called the Robust protocol. It was developed in a multidisciplinary, tongue-breaking language sometimes, team with IBM. It's actually the same team that I graduated, so now you know how I came to be involved. And the guy that led the team used this protocol many years later. Originally it was developed to allow voting using DES smart cards, and it was piloted at the University of Delft quite successfully. Basically what it boils down to, it is you get a virtual ballot based on DES encryption. So it's really simple. Who doesn't know what DES is? Good. It's a three-phase system. In the first phase, you do the preparation. This is where the magic begins. All that you basically need to know is that in this preparation phase, a pseudo-identity and a voter secret are generated. So those are DES keys. So now you basically have a method to identify a voter by something, this pseudo-identity, and you've given the voter a secret, so the voter can identify himself, him or herself. In the case of the water boards, that stuff then gets sent off to each individual voter, so you can immediately see that there are a number of risks there. But to me that was basically of no real relevance. It's like, well, it's not my task, it's not my risk. I basically have to create the system that does phase 2, the voting window, when you actually use it. I'll come to that later. And then phase 3, you basically count the votes. So you gather the results and count the votes. Damn it. This is what basically happens inside the voting system. You have the client system, like your average web browser PC, connects to a server, which is basically the polling station website, downloads a thing that allows him to cast his vote. That's the virtual ballot. It's basically a piece of JavaScript. So you go to the server, download a piece of JavaScript. There you do all your voting, like selecting a candidate, blah, 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 everything that. Then you use your pseudo-identity, your voter secret, to calculate what we call the technical vote. The technical vote is, in the end, basically an encrypted hash. You send the hash back to the polling station, vote server, and that's about it. You get a receipt. The system actually includes getting a receipt. So there's the problem of family voting again, but it also has the nice characteristic that you later on can actually see whether your vote was counted. If you want to know more about the voting protocol, on the previous slide there was a URL to a paper from the University of Nijmegen, who actually looked at the whole system. That has an excellent explanation in English. Now, if I go back to my problem, I had to run this bit, right? The server. So looking at that, it's like, right, so there's a connection, so they actually need to be able to connect, so the thing needs to be up and running, and I have to make sure that it actually has proper integrity, blah, blah. It's actually mine, no one else is using it. Download some stuff, blah, blah, blah. The beauty is, all the really sensitive stuff happens at the client side. Good, not my problem. Very nice. So there is nothing sensitive happening at the server, basically. Well, almost nothing. The only thing I can do is I could generate votes. No, that the protocol prevents that. I could throw away votes. That's basically the only thing I can do. The network isn't really that sensitive either, because the vote is encrypted with a desk key. So yes, if you throw enough money at the problem, you can crack a desk key within a reasonable time. But in our case, that wasn't enough of a problem to be truly worried about. Ha! We just heard the military approach to security. I am going to give you the tree huggers approach. It's all connected, man. Look at that, it's a castle. They had to know something about security in those days because, well, if you didn't, then you would die. So if you look at the castle, it's actually, if you want to attack this, you actually have to go over the bridge. Well, that has to be down first. Okay, first challenge. There's a gate. There are people on there that will definitely make sure that you will die before they do. Then you get here. Oh, damn it, more people to kill me. Then you get, what's that? It's another bridge. No, I just had one of those. Layered security. Once you've penetrated the first layer, you get to the next one. More chances to die, more chances for your attack not to succeed. So if you develop your defenses, well, you build layers, you build watchtowers, so you can actually see what is going on. See, I'm doing my Viking training. You didn't hear me say ow, but it did hurt. And then you get here, and from the looks of it, it says keep. So that's probably where the goodies are. Many of these things actually had back doors. It's quite nice to walk past these old castles. If you look at the map of the Netherlands, there's this big lake in the middle, right? That used to be a sea. And it became a lake when they actually built this thing from there to there. And it's called the closure dike. When it was World War II, the Germans figured, well, this is a nice way to basically get here. And over here, there is this big Navy base. So, well, it's only a small outpost there. Should be easy enough. It wasn't. Because, well, it might be hard, it might be not too hard to attack, but it's quite easy to defend. I mean, it's only a big highway, that's it. It's flat, so you can see anyone coming. Turns out that those guys actually held out over there. So when they bombed Rotterdam and they informed them, well, the war is over, they were like, what? But we're winning. Well, yeah, you're kind of winning the battle, but not really the war. So back to security architecture. You really have to solve the problem for the entire system. So you really have to be focused on what is my entire system and not the individual parts. Because the individual parts might actually function, but the system as a whole might still fail. Back to the elections, what is the primary goal there? It is not that the system stays secure to the end. The one and only goal into running a proper election, a successful one, is that in the end you have an outcome that is not challenged, that is considered to be valid, and that has nothing to do with system integrity, and it has everything to do with, is it reasonable? People are quite silly sometimes. Right, when you're designing stuff, know your risks. I can't protect my data centers against something like that. So, well, if I can't, why worry? I'm not in the military, I'm not in defense. Defense people worry about that stuff. They're using nuclear-resistant basement thingies. Another one to have in your security mindset, shit will happen. Definitely. This picture was taken some years ago. I was in Warsaw, so I didn't do it. This building used to be the computer center of the University of Twente in the Netherlands. And there was a disgruntled system administrator, and, well, the end of the story was this. And as you can see, the flames are rather high. Yes, it burned down to the ground. There was nothing left of their facilities. So shit like this will happen, logical stuff will also happen. Anything can and will go wrong. I mean, that law isn't there for nothing. There is a point where things are good enough. I mean, if this happens, then, well, yeah, my sleeping late on Saturday mornings is over anyway. So basically, if you're designing for secure systems, know how far you should go. A traditional risk management approach would be, well, there is cost involved, blah, blah. Well, yeah. So, there were a number of things that I had to keep in mind when designing this whole system architecture for the internet voting stuff. It actually had to do something. So in 2004, for 1.2 million people, it had to do 23 voters per second over SSL. If you looked at the equipment that was available back then, you could do something like 10, 20 with regular hardware. So that wasn't really enough. We applied the holistic approach, as in the tree huggers. It's all connected. Look at the system as a whole. Look at the entire system, not look at individual parts. Compartmentalized security. What does that mean? Something similar as layered security, but a bit different. It means compartmentalized, for example, if you have two setups, one of them dies, it shouldn't influence the other one. It dies for whatever reason. Layered. Suppose you connect to something and you're doing it over SSH. What happens if the SSH protocol or the implementation that you're using contains a vulnerability? Well, that's a bit bad. But if you're doing this over IPsec, then you basically have two layers of protection. Anyone can fail. If you play around with different implementations, then you get even, relatively speaking, more protection. Anything that we design should sustain multiple component failure, specifically like, well, a location burns up. It happens, we've seen that. Can't deny it. Lots of common sense is what you need. It's really nice to have policies and have things that you need to be compliant to, but at the end of the day, it's what actually works. What have we got running? It's not what's on paper. Paper doesn't run systems. It's people that run systems and systems that run systems. We had to incorporate lazy running because, well, lazy running, what's that? Well, running with as little human effort as possible. Because each one of us, and this was a small group, we were something like 4 people, was basically doing this either in partly spare time or amongst the other something like 30 things that we had to do. So it's not like we could actually afford to have someone during this 2-week voting window to actually sit and monitor screens for 24 hours a day. We didn't have the money, 300K. We didn't have the people. So anything we did, oh yeah, and it had to be dirt cheap. I think the hardware all in all was something like 25,000 euros. And it worked. The good news though is we weren't really in outer space. We had stuff. So you look around and, well, what do we have? There's this network. SurfNet had an interesting network. That made the distributed denial of service attack vulnerability a lot easier to tackle. It's like, well, first fill up the gig pipes, and then we'll start to worry. We had existing services. We could leverage of existing DNS, NTP, and some other stuff. And there was a SurfNet cert. This is basically SurfNet cert preparing for failure. The shit happens scenario. I have no clue what kind of shit can happen. That's the whole disadvantage of being in the security world. Anything that is currently running just fine, no one has found a security hole yet. Well, yeah, tomorrow I wake up and there is a security hole. Then you actually need people to figure out what is it, how do we counter it, and what can we do to mitigate the effect. We didn't have to build it specifically for this project because we already had it. So that was a big help. Right. Yeah. All right. So this is the big picture, what it eventually looked like. I'm cheating a little bit because this was actually the picture for the design in 2008. The stuff that I'm talking about was used in 2004 for 2 water board elections. It was used again in 2005 for 1 water board election and for electing the SurfNet representative board because I was on holiday in Norway and wanted to vote. And it was used in last year, November, for the Dutch parliament elections. So we enabled Dutch people living abroad to vote for the Dutch parliament using the internet. And basically the system was running on the same architecture that you will see here. What do we see? Multiple locations. So there is an installation here and here. Now, you're seeing some supporting services. Monitoring stuff. System administration. A voter. Right. There were a couple of practical problems to solve. First of all, I wanted to have multiple locations because, well, as you can see, locations burn down. So I wanted to have the capability to actually, because I was short on money, do load balancing between 2 locations and at the same time use them as failover. Why that? Well, because I wanted to have a cheap method. Ew, damn it. I wanted to have a very cheap method of actually getting resilience and at the same time be somewhat protected against denial of service. So we basically used round-robin DNS that kind of shared the load between the locations. A very nice way, a nicer and more elegant way to do that would be Anycast. The beauty is you don't have to use load balancers. You basically use something that is already in the network. The lesson here is that what is not there does not break down. Right, 5 minutes, so I'm not going to draw everything. Inside each location, we had a vote server that collected the votes. We had an SSL offloader that was basically used for offloading the SSL connections. That was the primary setup. If you look at it attack-wise, well, we could prevent the front port from being penetrated by using ACLs on the router level, VLANing, blah, blah, firewalls on the host. Still, you do sysadmining. Now, I'm wondering how many of you actually do sysadmining on the laptops that you're carrying, but those are the same laptops that you actually receive virus-infected emails on. I couldn't do that. I didn't want to run the risk that you make one bad click and then all of a sudden, pooh, whole thing is infected. So basically, we kind of separated the whole sysadmin plane from everything else, and we purchased dedicated laptops, connected them to the local system administration network using very small VPN devices that you could carry. Each location next to that had as supporting services a syslog server. In case anything went wrong, we could basically still see what happened. And an IDS server, which in the end we didn't use because it generated too much false stuff. With a setup like this, you could actually do it some other way around. You could do the IDS like, well, I know exactly what's supposed to come in. So I don't want to know about any attack that is known. And I don't want to know about any traffic that comes in that is not known, that relates directly, that is good. I only want to know what is not good and not known. This is the dashboard that we were basically looking at, monitoring all the relevant system parameters. If anything out of the ordinary would happen, you would see it somewhere here. I didn't watch it, but luckily during the election there were 2 people that were actually watching it. And you could very easily instruct them, well, this is what the normal line is. If anything looks different, then give us a call. It worked in the end. And if you look at the graphs, you can see that it's not that many. It's like 10K bytes. It's like 2 SSL negotiations. So this whole assumption about 23 new voters per second was a bit off. But the beauty from my security point of view is that, well, okay, so I have a huge chunk of unused resources, which is good because that gives me time in case anything bad happens. Something interesting, there was no peak. So this is in the first election with Rhineland, with Dommel, multiple elections, and they all look the same. So apparently if you do internet voting with lots of people, then the votes basically come trickling in. Never expected that. So, is internet voting a menace to society? Now, only if you do it really badly. I'm quite convinced that I actually designed a reasonable architecture. I'm quite convinced that the internet voting protocol is also done quite reasonably. Yet, if you look at many of the internet voting machines out there, read the papers, read the blogs, most of it is done by commercial companies that have done this 15 years ago, and it is crappy. My time is up, isn't it? No. So I should probably leave it at that. Oh. A question for you to ponder during lunch. What would be easier to monitor? 10,000 polling stations or one centralized location? And that is the beauty about internet voting, because now we can actually build that one centralized location. You can have a solid one, a well-known group of people that you have to look at. And if you look at Nigeria or the UK or other African countries, you can see that it is quite easy to actually corrupt elections. And I'm wondering about DNL. What do I think? I think that we're being quite stupid. We're all techies. We know how to build this. Hey, I did it. I'm not special. Many people walking around here can actually design stuff like this. At our universities, there are people who can work out proper voting protocols. They actually do that. So why on earth do we, as voters, as people who want to sleep late on Saturday mornings, actually allow commercial companies or our governments, hey, the bad people already in power, remember, we actually allow them to define for us how they should change positions? That's really stupid. It really is. So if we as a community can actually build one of the best web servers out there, why can't we build something that is really of crucial importance to us? And if you're still not convinced, this was on the register last week. Cute, isn't it? Current state of affairs. This annoys me. So if there's anyone here who is actually interested in, I don't know, start thinking about open source development of internet voting systems, maybe because your universities actually need to do elections, maybe you want to run it as a service, maybe you want to sell it, I'm sure that there's money in there. But what I would like to have is a system that is not proprietary, it's open, I can see what happens, and it is not owned by a commercial entity or a government. It's voting, it's democracy, it's from us, for us. That is what I would like. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have run pretty close up to lunch. One question? Quick question?
You're following some parameters of the overall system. How do you know that the system worked? How do you know that the voting was correct? How do you know that the implementation was correct? You're following parameters, but however, their parameters were parametric. of the voting. It's a parameter for the operation of the systems. They have no parameters for the voting per se. Do you understand? You're following and things out of the systems, not of the process. How do you know the process didn't work as it should?
Well, because naturally an audit was done when the system was implemented. And
That is not a secure way to monitor a process. Those who implement, they are following the... So normally you have two different bodies that check each other. So it's not the implementer. It's not the implementer who follows the validity of the process.
I'm not totally sure I fully understand the
So
question.
I'm trying to say that you have a system that...
Right, well, what I wanted to say was that you've secured your end of the system, but you haven't looked at it in a system point of view. What about the end user machines? What about the DNS sitting on the ISPs? What about the circuits on the ISPs? That sort of thing. It may not be worth hacking those for a water board election. If you actually have things which involve real money, real power, people have an incentive to spend a very large amount of money in order to swing an election your way. It is very unusual to find techies who are keen on e-elections. It is usually the politicians who feel this is progress and it must be better to do it on the internet. You're very unusual in that most people, the more they know about elections, the more they know about security, the less keen they are on actually putting any of this stuff anywhere near the systems in the state which they are today.
You've actually hit the nail on its head. It's basically your risk assessment, and it's like, well, yeah, it's water board elections, they came from postal voting. There are loads of insecurities in that. If you want to actually raise anything like this to the level of a full-scale national election, lots of work needs to be done. And I'm not totally convinced that you might want to go that way, knowing how modern Trojans actually work.
Thanks very much to all of our speakers. I mean, I would observe that it's not only e-voting that has problems. Recent vote in the UK, one region introduced stronger auditing of postal voting, and 80% of registered postal voters disappeared. So that was good old-fashioned paper voting through envelopes, which seems to have been extremely badly broken. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you to you for listening to the questions, and have a good lunch and see you back this afternoon.